Diolch. No points deducted, please, for the pronunciation of my good afternoon, but I'm hoping prynhawn da. So, okay, there we go. Right, so we'll get started with that. So, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you this afternoon. So, I'm pretty much going to talk to you non-stop, right? I can talk for England until Christmas about everything that I'm going to cover with you this afternoon, but I'm going to be talking for till about 4:30, and then we're going to take as many questions as you want to throw at me in about 20 minutes. But first, everybody, I'm going to ask you some questions and you're going to give them an answer. You're going to give me an answer for them. Now, the first question you might think sounds a little bit weird, right? But basically what we're going to be talking about, in addition to talking about burnout, I'm going to be talking to you about this topic here. So the self-centered approach to change, right? So why you need to be putting yourself first. And you might be thinking, well, what do we mean by self-centered? Well, that's my first question for you. So I think by the magic of technology, we're all going to have a bit of a Slido, I think. Right, here we go. So the first question that I would like you to answer is, what comes to mind when you think of being self-centered? When you think of being self-centered, what comes to mind? It's like, what's happening with the QRs? Come to the front if you need to. If you need to come and scan from the front, run to the front, scan what you need to. Okay, so when we think of being, this is a lovely list, isn't it? So only thinking of yourself, putting me first, unaware, guilt, self-indulgent, selfish, arrogant, happy, calmness, internally. This isn't really a shopping list of anything that anybody wants then, is it? Right, yes, I want to be all of these things. Okay, focused on oneself, not thinking of others, unusual, cocky, self-absorbed, egotistical, thinking of myself, internally focused. Okay. So by the end of my talk today, I'm going to be telling you why you all need to be self-centered. And you're probably now thinking, well, I'm not any of those things, right? So I'm going to talk to you this afternoon. They're still coming in. Okay. So wellbeing, not a team player, protective, needed, kind. We're getting some nice ones now, right? Kind. We maybe want one on there. Okay. So our first question then, what comes to mind when you think of being self-centered? And you've all put some interesting words on the board. Thank you very much. So our second question then that I would like to go through with you is a scaling question. You might think, what on earth has this got to do with being self-centered? Our second question, again, is on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, where would you rank burnout? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest on the scale, where would you rank burnout? Ooh, which one's going to win? Yes, if we had a scale of 1 to 10, so a stress scale, 1 being the lowest score and 10 being the highest, where would you rank burnout? So on a stress scale of 1 to 10, what's winning? 8. Ooh, it's growing, it's growing, it's growing. Okay, still coming through. We've still got the winner of 8 though. Oh, 32%. Okay. Question number 3. QR codes at the ready. Maybe not. Here we go. Okay. If we were to talk about burnout, and some of you may be like, we don't even told us what it is yet, right? This is just to gauge your understanding. How long can burnout take to present itself? So I'm talking to you about burnout. How long can burnout take to present itself? How long can burnout take until it reaches its peak? I always love some of these non-committal answers, right? Years, months, a long time. As long as it takes, ages, 1 month, 40 years, 6 months, weeks, years, a day, 12 months, varies, depends, multiple stages, 40 years, 6 months, 3 months, varies, immediately, a few weeks. Anytime, depends on context. Career spanning. So we could probably agree on this one. None of us really want to go that non-committal, right? We're just like, just as long as it takes. Okay. And then your final question that I am going to be asking you this afternoon is, what is the largest cause of burnout globally? What's the number one cause of burnout globally? Maybe whoever answered the 40 years question is just like everything, right? Everything. I mean, whatever takes your fancy. We're not liking the Taylor Swift then, okay? Okay. Rain, okay. Lack of meaning, staff, trying to juggle it all, lack of control, working hours, work-related stress, technology, overwhelm, emails, rain. I'm not sure we can keep Taylor Swift on the list, if I'm being totally honest with you. Under-resourced, juggling life, overworking, okay. So a lot of us think it's work. We've got some government, we've got some Taylor Swift. Okay, no psychological safety. All right. So, why have I started there, and what has any of this got to do with what it is that I'm going to talk to you about? So I'm going to give you the answers to these questions, and then I'm going to talk you through my own burnout story, why I now do what I do, why I'm passionate about why I do what I do, and then I want to bring it back to you, and I want to explain to all of you why it is that I want every single one of you, by the time you leave here this evening or tomorrow, when you finish the rest of the academy, is I want all of you to be self-centered, right? And you were like, well, I'm not selfish, right? I'm definitely not selfish. So you're absolutely right. When we think of being self-centered, what most of us think about is we're being selfish, right? Putting ourselves first is selfish. And what about everybody else that I need to deal with? Yeah, I've got team, I've got partner, relationships, I've got children, I've got caring responsibilities, I've got all of these things. I can't possibly look after myself. By the end of today, I want you to be able to reframe that, but your words are very interesting. Typically, whenever we talk about being self-centered, the first thing that usually comes to mind is selfishness. Because actually, the majority of us, haven't we, have been told that everything we do needs to be about other people. That actually it is selfish to put our needs first. It is selfish to put our time first. It is selfish to ask for whatever it is that we need. But actually that's adding to a lot of the stress, to that £28 billion in terms of burnout and stress-related absence that we talked about a few moments ago. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and I think we came up, didn't we? Number 8, I think, was our winner with 32% there. So if we talk about a scale, so I'm going to say that this end of the stage here, I'll stop at the mic so we don't go tripping over anything. If we have a stress scale, okay, 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, 0 to 5, kind of 1 to 5 on that scale, we're really talking about like normal everyday stress, okay? And every single one of us needs some stress in our lives. We all need stress. Not all stress is bad for us. We need stress to help us achieve our goals. We need stress to get us out of bed in the morning. We need stress to motivate us. We need stress to help us get over the finish line. We need stress in order to allow us to compete or go for job interviews or stand up on stage and do presentations or get ourselves in the room. So stress isn't always a bad thing. We need stress. We need everyday stress in order to keep us motivated and inspired and to keep us going. So kind of 0 to 5, 1 to 5 on this scale is what we class as normal everyday stress, right? The normal everyday things. And on that kind of 0 to 5, if we were to remove the stressor, so let's say it was a project, let's say, I don't know, we had a leaking roof, the boiler broke, the car broke down, any of those things. Typically, if we then remove that stress, we will be able to reduce the stress that we are experiencing about it, okay? So if we reduce the stressor, our stress levels continue to come down. If we're in the kind of 6 to 8 scale, sometimes maybe even really kind of 6 to 7, this is where even if we start to remove the stressor, we can still start to experience some of the overhang of stress. This is really where it would start to impact our sleep patterns. Maybe it's impacting our health. Maybe we're starting to get a few more headaches. Maybe we're getting digestive issues. Maybe we're snapping at our colleagues or our loved ones or our friends. So 6 to 8 starts to become a bit more uncomfortable for us. When we get to 9, we start to move into the chronic stress area. And chronic stress is high levels of stress that we have been experiencing over an extremely long period of time. And the longer that we stay in that point, the more likely we are to then reach our number 10, which is the point where we get to burnout. So burnout is number 10 on that scale. But for a lot of us, we don't really think of burnout like that. I remember seeing lots of people kind of posting all of their marketing campaigns, right, at the beginning and end of 2023, right? Have a burnout-free 2023. And actually what they were trying to sell was like VA services, or they were trying to sell marketing, or they were trying to sell something else. When I started my career, and some of you also may be familiar with this one, but certainly when I started my career kind of I'm going to say like 5 years ago. But when I started kind of 26 years ago, we almost kind of used to compete, right? I remember sort of speaking to some of my colleagues on a Monday morning and being like, good morning, how are you? And they'd be like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. And I go, oh my God, me too, right? And then we'd almost have this kind of competing, right? Which one of us was busier than the other? Because actually, if you weren't busy, you weren't successful. Right, so we'd go into this, oh, I'm so busy, oh, I'm so busy, oh, let me tell you what I'm doing, no, let me tell you. So we'd kind of go into this competing, right, who's busiest. Then throughout kind of late 2000, kind of before we came into kind of sort of 2018, 2019, people then started swapping busy with stressed, right? On a Monday morning, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm so stressed, oh my God, me too. Right, let me tell you about it. No, let me tell you what I'm dealing with. No, I'm more stressed than you. No, I'm more stressed. So we started competing on a stress level. Because again, stress, if we're stressed, we're successful. Right, we're growing, we're learning, we're developing, we're amazing, we're important, right? The more stressed we are, the more important we are. And then the World Health Organization in 2019 defined burnout as this workplace phenomenon. And from 2019, everybody was at burnout. So on a Monday morning, we'd then go up to our colleagues, we'd be like, how are you? I'm so burnt out. Right, oh my God, me too. Right, let me tell you about it. Let me tell you, I'm so burnt out. Yeah, well, you don't know what I'm dealing with, let me tell you. And then 2020 happened. And actually for a lot of us that were genuinely starting then to develop some of the symptoms of burnout, we just kept going. And we kept looking after everybody else, and we kept ignoring everybody else, and we were told that it needed to be about everybody else. And actually, from lots of us within our organisations, it all became about our people. We needed to keep things going. It became about our customers, it became about our people. I've worked with, since then and even before then, a number of people within the NHS, consultants, registrars. I've spoken to professors and consultants. I work with many, many different sectors right the way across the world. But what was really apparent during 2020 was those people that were more involved in looking after other people didn't even really acknowledge anything that was going on during 2020. They couldn't, because they didn't have the headspace. They didn't know what they would be doing. They couldn't focus on anything. We just need to keep going. I've got to make sure everybody else is okay. I've got to be managing the homeschooling, and I've got to be looking after this, and I've got carers, I've got all of this thing to do, and I need to make sure that my team is okay. And we just kept going and going. So it's probably no surprise, actually, that since 2019, the cases of burnout have more than doubled. And the burnout gender gap has more than doubled. But actually, when I see all of these statistics and I see everything that's out there, burnout, every single one of those statistics represents a person. In 2022, 78% of executives said that they were considering leaving the workplace to go and work in organisations that were healthier and better for their mental health. Now, if we've got 78% of execs that don't want to be in the organisations that they're in, actually, what impact does that have for everybody else? If the exec cannot influence happy, healthy and high-performing workplaces, what impact does everything else have? So burnout can take up to 3 years to reach its peak. And when I say peak, I mean like falling off the end of the stage. Like can't deal with it anymore, can't cope with it anymore, we just stop. But the number one cause of that globally, according to all of the research and all of the papers, the number one cause of burnout globally is toxic workplaces. Toxic workplaces are the number one cause of burnout globally. But not everybody that's in a toxic workplace is experiencing burnout. So this is where I come to what I call the burnout equation, right? Which is toxic workplaces minus our sense of self equals burnout. Toxic workplaces minus our sense of self equals burnout. So I'm going to share with you, I suppose, my story. It may resonate with some of you, it may not. It may bring up feelings for some of you, it may not. The good news is it ends happily because I'm stood here, right? It ends happily because I'm stood here. But my parents would actually tell you that I came out of the womb as a high-performing, high achiever, right? That's how they'll explain me to anybody. They'd also probably add stubborn and bossy. But I was a high-performing, high achiever as I came out of the womb. And I'd been moved up a year at school. I was even, I was in all of the top sets. I was moved up a year at school. I was, getting certificates for athletics. I look like an athlete, I know, right? So I was getting all these certificates for athletics. I was the captain of all of my teams. And then when I joined the workplace, I was getting promotion after everybody else. And I had this 8-year period in my kind of late 20s, early 30s, that I had, over 8 years, had a 8-year period, 7 promotions over an 8-year period, and added over £100,000 to my salary during that time. I'll also add, unexpectedly, I became a mum of twins at 20. So to then go through this kind of 8-year period of 7 different promotions, right, and I wore it really well, right? I said about this kind of stress badge, right, the busy brat badge. I used to I don't know how she does it, and I wore that with pride. I'd get the comments about Wonder Woman. Don't know how you do it, Wonder Woman. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm flying, this is me. And I did all of that because I relished it, but I didn't actually think I was really doing anything any different than anybody else. I'd never had twins before, right? People used to say to me, I don't know how you deal with twins. Like I'd never had not twins, right? I don't know what it's like to deal with just one child. I had twins. And everybody would say, but I don't know how you do it. We do it, right? I'm just doing it. People would say, I don't know how you're doing this stuff at work. I just did it. And then by the time I reached 30, just before or just after my 30th birthday, I had been headhunted for a role in London. And it was an organisation of 5,000, managing a team of 43. Huge salary, great organisation. Well, I say great organisation, great opportunity. I was working as an HR director. Any HR in the room? A few of you, kind of. And some of you outside of HR may have this as well, right? But we love a broken organisation in HR. We love it, right? Because if we can turn that around, we can do anything, right? Literally earning my cape so I can fly across, right? We love it. So I knew, and the headhunter had contacted me to say there's this bit of a broken organisation. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then they told me all of the problems, and I was like, yeah, I really want that job, right? I really, really want that job. And what I was told during the kind of interview process, I had started to, in 2008, I'd scrapped annual performance appraisals. In 2010, I was burning the handbook. I was focusing on individualism in the workplace, right? I was doing some really kind of magic stuff that nobody else was doing in the workplace. And I was loving it. And that's what I was told I had been headhunted for this role for. And on day one, in this organisation that were paying me this ridiculously huge salary, first off, I sat in reception for 50 minutes on my first day because nobody knew I was coming, which was a little bit of a worry. But I'm like writing it down on my notepad, right? Must improve onboarding, right? And then somebody came down and they're like, hi. And then they took me into like a side room and just kept plying me with tea. And I'm like, I've left my job to come here. Should I be here or like what's happening, right? But I'd also just paid £13,000 for my annual season ticket to get to London. So the part of me, like in my gut instinct that was like, you need to get out of this organisation, I was like, no, because I'm still like writing all these things down. I can improve this and I can improve this. And I just paid £13,000 for my annual season ticket. I'm not wasting, no, can't waste that, right? But my gut instinct was telling me to get out of this organisation. And I completely ignored it. Completely ignored it. And 3 months later, my gut instinct was still telling me that I needed to get out of that organisation, and I ignored it. And 6 months later, my gut was like, really, like, you need to get out of here now. It was a toxic exec team, it was a toxic board, so many immoral and underhand things that were going on across the organisation, but I genuinely still believed that I could fix it. I genuinely believed that I could fix it. And as a person that was passionate, genuinely passionate about wanting to change the world of work, right? That's why I started in my HR career. I genuinely wanted to change the world of work. I wanted to stop people experiencing this Monday to Friday dying syndrome. I now do it from a burnout perspective, so that part of it has stayed the same. But that's what I was there for. I genuinely wanted the people in this organisation to have a better work life. I wanted them to be valued and trusted and respected. And with all of the stuff that was going on in this organisation, I genuinely continued to think that I could fix it. And then towards the end of 2012, I was basically told, you are now restructuring your entire team. But there was a lot of immoral and unethical things going on within that organisation. And I knew that I was only being told, not asked, but told to restructure my team because I had been questioning some of this behaviour that was going on. It was a kind of, we're going to show you, and this is what you're going to do. And so I'd spent the December kind of arguing, and it's like, we do it or not. And I got to the point of, do you know what, if you're going to do this anyway, I'm going to be the person to lead it. Right? As a great leader, if you're going to do this anyway, I'm going to stay because I'm going to be sure that every single one of my team is treated with respect and treated in the best possible way that they can. And this process will be moral and it will be ethical, and I'm going to be the one to lead it. I'm not having any of you leading it. We had some kind of external consultants that were in leading it as well, but I wasn't having any of them getting involved with my team. So whilst I didn't agree with any of it, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I'd gone back to work in the January after the Christmas break to start going through this process with my team. And by lunchtime on the first day, I couldn't stand up. I had this really bad pain in my stomach, and I just couldn't get off the seat. And I was in a room with 2 other directors, and they're saying to me, Kelly, you've really got to go. I'm like, not going. I'm a brilliant HR director. I care about my team. If anybody is leading this process, I'm leading this process. And I stayed. And on the Thursday, I managed to get myself into London again, but I couldn't stand up straight. And I walked into the room and the director said to me, you shouldn't be here. I was a great director. I was a great leader. Nobody was going to take my team through this process without me doing it. So I said, I'm staying. And on the Friday, the pain was so unbearable, I couldn't even carry my handbag. The pain was so bad, I couldn't even carry my handbag. But I still made it into London. Still carried on doing everything that I was doing because I was a great director, a great leader, and nobody else was going to do that to my team without me being there. And then on the train on the way home that night, the pain got so unbearable that I kind of had to run into the toilets on the train. My biggest accomplishment that day, if any of you know what I'm talking about here, probably not what you think, but you know the disabled toilet doors, right? Are you locked? Are you not? What does the flashing light mean? What does the solid light mean? Am I safe? Am I not? My biggest accomplishment that day was getting in there and the door was locked. I was like, woohoo! But I hadn't realised that I'd passed out from the pain until I hit my head on the sink and found myself on the floor. Made it back to my seat, was ever so grateful that as I kind of got off the train at the right station, a friend of mine had been on the train a few carriages back and literally caught me just before I fell over. And her husband took me to A&E, and they left me at A&E. Sorry, what we're doing there? There we go. Are we there? Yeah. Left me at A&E, and I was basically told there's nothing wrong with you. But it might be a bit of a water infection. Here's some tablets, see how you feel on Monday. So what did I do on Monday, everybody? I went to work. Why? Because I was managing this process, I was dealing with this process, I was a great leader, I was a great HR director, and nobody was going to do this to my team without me being there. This was January. Let's recap. January. By the July, I'd had 9 hospital admittances. I'd not had one day off work. Not one. Anybody a fan of Friends, the TV series Friends in the room? Some of you know, yes. There's one episode and they get asked, what would life have looked differently like if we'd have done things differently, right? And there's Phoebe with her straight cut bob and her black tailored suit, puffing away on all of these cigarettes, right? Working from her hotel bed, like shouting at people on the phone because she was important. That was me, right? That was me. And I carried on going. And you might be thinking, and I'm going to answer this for you in a way, like, why didn't you stop? Why didn't you just stop? So I carried on going. In the August, I ended up having 2 operations in 48 hours for 2 actually really serious health conditions. 2 different hospitals, 2 different consultants, 2 different operations. I was forced to take a week off. Why was I forced to take a week off? Because it didn't matter that I was senior director reporting into the board. My mum had called my CEO and said, Kelly needs her email access cutting off. This is getting a little bit ridiculous. So my mum told me I had 30 minutes until my email access was going. Let's just say, like, unhappy was an understatement. But in those 30 minutes, I'd worked out, I already knew everybody's email address. So I could still email them from my personal email. But then my team started telling the CEO, and the CEO told my mum, and then I wasn't allowed to work anymore. So I did have 1 week off, right? 1 week off. As a really senior, important director with my mum and my CEO, like, oh, what are we going to do here? So you can imagine the embarrassment around some of that, right? But I still didn't think there was anything wrong with me. I still did not think there was anything wrong with me. And whilst I'm taking this week off to recover from these 2 operations in 48 hours for quite serious health conditions, my sons had come home from school one day and they're 12 years old. And they walk in and I blame the daytime TV, right? If anybody can remember what daytime TV used to look like in 2012, you could have chat shows from 8 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, right? American chat shows back to back all the time. So I blame the chat shows for how I may have appeared as my sons came home from school that day. But they took one look at me. My response to my sons, as I could see their faces drop, was, don't worry. Mum is going to be okay, and I'm going to be back at work next week. And my sons took one look at each other and sat on the coffee table that was in front of the sofa. And they said, but Mum, we don't want you to go back to work because your job is killing you. And that hit me harder than 8 months of pain. And I thought, I need to change something. Right? Something has to change. But I still didn't think the job was the issue. Still did not think the job was the issue. And then towards the end of that week, I'd gone for my checkups with these 2 consultants, and both of them mentioned this word burnout. Talk to us about the stress in your job. And I went, my job's not stressful. And so they sent me home. But I did think something needed to change. And so I had a couple of days to myself. I do quite a lot of journaling and talking. You can tell I talk a lot, but I kind of, I talk to myself and I try to find these answers, and I'm journaling and I'm looking for all of these decisions. And I realise in that moment, I've worked in stressful organisations. I have been the fixer and actually transformed workplaces for people since my late teens, right? That's what I do. It wasn't the toxicity of this organisation, but the difference in toxicity of this organisation that had added to where I had got to was that I had lost myself along the way. My values, my strengths, my beliefs, everything that I stood for, I had been adjusting and tweaking and changing to try to think that actually if I changed, I could then be able to influence this toxic exec team. So if they were excluding people from meetings, I'd be like, well, I'm going to show you. Their behaviours I was mirroring because I thought in order to succeed in this organisation, if I want to get all of this great stuff across the line, I need to be a little bit more like them. I need to change. I need to be the one that's going to change all of this stuff. And what I'd realised as I was coming through that recovery was that's what was missing. It wasn't the stress of the organisation. I can deal with stress. Every single psychometric that I have done my entire career will say Kelly's personality is prone to stress, right? And I genuinely was born, so my parents tell me, as a high-performing high achiever. But I had never lost myself in such a way as I had within that organisation. I didn't know who I was. So I decided that I was going to go back to work, but I was going to go back as me. And I also realised that a lot of part of my career, I'd been told that if I needed to influence, I needed to drop a bit of the colour and I needed to be wearing black, right? Because we fit in if we wear black. And I've been told to be a bit less chatty and a bit less curious. And I've been told to ask less questions and to care less and to be less engaged and to not care as much about the people in the organisation, because actually that wasn't really HR's job. I was told that all of these things, so every single time that I'd been told that, in order to try and fit in this organisation, to genuinely change it in the way that I thought I needed to, I had become less and less and less and less. And I decided if I was going back to work, I wasn't doing that anymore. So I cut the hair off, went back in a bright suit, stuck 2 fingers up at the exec, like I'm going to do what I need to do. But it was on that first day back that I walked into this organisation and I was like, oh, this is the most toxic workplace ever. Why would anybody stay here? And so I started to look for other jobs, but all of them pretty much looked the same. And I thought, I don't want to be doing that. And at the time I was completing my exec coaching qualification, and I heard myself say for the first time, I'm going to start my own business. I had no idea where that came from, right? I genuinely thought I was going to be a corporate lifer. But I thought, okay, fine. And on the train on the way home that day, I had come up with a company name and I'd rang my husband and I was like, I'm going to start a business. And I was the main breadwinner in our house. We had just spent every single penny on buying and renovating a house. We had no financial cushion. And he went, yeah, that's great, Kelly. Give it 2 years. And 3 months later, I had left the job, knew that I just needed to make it work. I started an award-winning people and change consultancy. I had my first clients within the first month. I was doing all of this great stuff that I thought I'd been employed to do, right? Focusing on people, scrapping annual performance appraisals, scrapping policies, really, really putting people at the heart of organisations, winning awards, got all of this stuff going on. And then I burnt out again. And my first burnout made me seriously ill, but this second one quite nearly killed me. But I didn't change anything. I'd been learning more since I came and started up my business, and I wanted to kind of understand stress a little bit more. But actually the biggest change for me was when I received a phone call to tell me that my replacement had died in her sleep whilst away on a leadership residential. And 2 days later, I received a phone call, and I call this the kind of Harry Potter complex, right? We will have all worked in teams or organisations where somebody has left under a cloud and we must never mention their name again, right? And that's what I'd experienced in this organisation. I knew that there'd been this quick turnover of HR directors, but we weren't allowed to talk about them, weren't allowed to mention them by name, weren't allowed to talk any of the work that they'd done. They were just not there. But I received this phone call 2 days after being told that Alison had died. And I'd known this woman because I'd worked alongside her whilst I'd been in the organisation. And 2 days later, I received a phone call that told me I was the 4th HR director to have become seriously ill in that organisation. So I thought, well, we can't stand for this. So I rang the CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. I have a different name for them, but that's what it officially stands for. And I rang them and I said, hi, what are you doing to help these HR directors, right? I've become seriously ill. Apparently I'm the 4th and my replacement's just died. And they said, contact your EAP, right? Your Employee Assistance Provider. And I was like, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. What are we doing? And then began my mission. So my mission to banish burnout in this changing world of work is literally no other person will jeopardise their health or well-being or lose their life as a result of the work that they do. Happy, healthy and high-performing workplaces, happy, healthy and high-performing people are what get me out of bed in the morning. I do that through the Burnout Academy. I do it through talks like this. I do it through the resources. I do it through working with leaders. I do it through lots and lots of different ways. But no other person is going to jeopardise their health or lose their life as a result of their job on my watch. So in all of the years then that I have been doing that, and in this burnout equation, what was missing during those first few times was me. I was missing. And that's why I want every single one of you to be self-centered by the time we leave here, right? Now, a lot of the work that I was doing, I talk about the gap, right? We have this gap, who we really are and who we present to be or who we live as, right? When these two are aligned, there's no way that burnout can get in there, right? Because we're living in line with our values and our beliefs in absolutely everything that we do. But the bigger this gap between who we really are and who we think we've got to be or who we need to mask as or who we need to pretend to be or who we're told we can't be, the bigger this gap, the bigger the gap there is for burnout to fill. And so many of us don't know who we are, right? So many of us, we lose the job or the kids go off to university or we get a divorce or something happens like a life event and we think, who am I? I can remember being asked to deliver a talk. I'd only been in business about 3 months and I'd been asked to deliver this talk for a huge event in London as part of a kind of NatWest Women in Business group. And I'd done loads of talks before, but I'd always had like my big brand employers behind me. And I can remember driving to this event in my car and I needed to pull over because there was like, my head was taken over as I mean, like, who am I? Like, I haven't got the big brand behind me. I haven't got the big job anymore. Like, who wants to hear me talk? What have I got to say that anybody's going to want to listen to, right? Because I didn't know who I was. And I pulled over in this lap and I'm like, can't do it, right? I need to tell them I've got a stomach ache. I need to say this has happened, I need to say. And then I talked to myself, and actually, they've asked you for a reason, you need to go. And I did it. But we need to get back to ourselves. This gap between who we're told to be, but we don't really get the opportunity, do we? Right? When we're children, when we're growing, we live to the values and behaviours of our parents or our carers or our schools or our churches or our groups or whatever it is that we've got. We get to school and we're told you need to follow this code, right? You need to follow these values and these behaviours and these beliefs. And then we start uni and that's the same. And then we start in the world of work and we're told these are our values and these are our behaviours and this is what you must do. And then we get to a point and we think, well, who am I? And actually the reason that we don't know is because nobody ever asks us. Right, what are your values? Who are you? I don't know. What do you enjoy? Well, I do this thing because my kids always do it. I do this thing because my other half always does it, right? Many of us don't know. But we need to be closing that gap, and this is where it comes. I want you to be self-centered. Most of us will focus on our relationships, our world, and our work. Pretty much all of us, right? Our relationships will probably come first. If I asked you to list all of your priorities, if I asked you to give me percentages of what you spend with everything, probably most of you will be telling me that your relationships are the most important. And yet you're probably spending a bit more time in the work or the world. But there is a gap there, and that gap needs to be filled. But that gap has to be filled by you. You are the missing link. If we want to banish burnout, if we want to change the world of work, if we want to live happy, healthy, high-performing lives, if we want to be happy, healthy, high-performing people, if we want to make a difference in the world, whether that's to our families or our teams or our relationships or our friends, we have to be in the centre of our lives, right? You have to be the star of your own show. You have to be the leading role. Because one of the things that we need to do is we need to create connection. Connection to our relationships and our work, but we also need to connect to ourselves. We need to implement boundaries, and boundaries are much more than just saying no. Boundaries are how we protect our time, energy, and attention. And if we want to be spending the time in our relationships, we need those boundaries around the work and the world. We need to accept who we are, acknowledge who we are, accept and acknowledge where we fit with our relationships, our work, and our world, not by being diminished, not by being shrunk, but by putting ourselves at the centre of our lives. And I don't mean that we all need to go, kind of Instagram friendly. It's not like, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? We don't need to be all of that, right? We don't need to be Instagram or Facebook, right? We don't need any of that stuff happening. But you need to understand your values, your strengths, your behaviours. You need to understand your passions, what drives you, what gets out of bed in the morning. You need to understand how big the gap is between who you really are and who you've been told that you need to be. Because the bigger the gap there is, the bigger the gap there is for burnout to fill. So this self isn't about fake. It's about you. Who are you at your core? Who were you before the world told you who you couldn't be? Where's that person? How do we bring that person back? Because actually, and I started by saying, my parents will say that I came out of the womb as a high-performing high achiever that was bossy and stubborn. After my burnout, I didn't really know who I was. And I thought genuinely, and I was asking that question earlier, I genuinely thought it must have been the work, right? I must have been the problem. I must have failed. Maybe I shouldn't have been working at that level. Maybe I was the issue. So actually goals, being high performing, being high achieving, really terrifies me. But that's also what led me to that second burnout, because I was afraid of being the high performing high achiever because I didn't want to reach burnout again. So I was then trying to be somebody much less than I was. And that's what nearly killed me in my second burnout. I now live with 3 lifelong health conditions, 1 mental, 2 physical. Invisible disabilities, they're never going to go. I'm never going to fully recover from burnout. But it is genuinely my life's mission to ensure that every single one of you can begin to be self-centered and put yourselves first so that you don't end up in the situation that I did. Because every single one of you, if you can sit with the question, who am I? And really answer that, right? Get clear on your values. Share your values with your friends, with your family, with your team, with your organisations. That's how we create change within our organisations. That's how we achieve and succeed when we are implementing change within our organisations. That's how we succeed when we're implementing change in our lives, with our families or anything. But it all starts with this. If we're trying to fake being something or trying to be something that we're not, we cannot implement a change because it's not a true change. And that doesn't mean that we can't disagree or we can't argue or we can't do things slightly differently, but it has to be us that we put first. If you are not self-centered, any change, any skills, any development, anything that you do isn't going to succeed. You have to be self-centered. You need to be putting yourself first, setting those boundaries, creating that awareness, making sure that you are doing everything you can to protect your time, energy, and attention. And from there, every single one of us is responsible for changing the world of work. I'm going to say thank you very much for listening, and we'll take some questions. Thank you. Diolch.
Wow. Come join me, Kelly. You've already got questions. Even before you finish.
Even before?
Before you finish, questions already start coming in. I'm going to take a couple of questions from Slido and then I'll open up to the floor if people want to ask their questions through the mic. I think the first one, is people pleasing bad?
Yes. Squeaky chair. I'm going to caveat it. I think actually people pleasing genuinely comes from a fear, right? People pleasing is a deep-rooted fear that we are not good enough and that we have to be putting other people first in order to be able to be liked or anything else. So it's not bad, right? And we get to, you know, it's a lovely thing to do. But again, it's usually driven by a fear. So if we're doing it from the basis of fear, then it becomes a bad thing.
When you resigned from the toxic job,
yes,
did you have a conversation about why to the director or to your boss?
Yes.
So how did it go?
I got paid a load of money to leave quietly.
Okay.
There we go. That's basically it. I got paid a load of money to leave quietly. Yeah, I mean, they didn't think there was a problem. Again, they thought it was me. I did then go back to them once I'd had this phone call about the death of Alison and the illness of these other people, but was basically told, you signed an agreement, we're not talking to you. I think ignoring our intuition can then definitely allow us to drive that ego. In that organisation, I wasn't being ego-led, but I was there to try and do what I could for other people, genuinely putting other people at the forefront, not listening to myself, not paying attention to my intuition, and that's then where I got lost in that environment. Okay.
As a follow-up, actually, there's a question on Slido which links up really nicely to this. Well, how do you then manage the dilemma of personally needing to leave, which is what you said, you know, you had that feeling, I gotta go, but then knowing you are the only protection for your team in that toxic workplace?
Again, I think we need to get all of our, really get all of our teams to go through exactly the same process, right? Why are our teams, what can we give to our teams? We get all of our teams to go through that process of who are you? What are your values? What are your strengths? We get everybody asking those questions, because actually if our teams can then be better equipped with what they need, we don't need to be the protectors of our teams. We can guide and we can support and we can lead and we can manage, but we do not need to be the protectors, particularly if we're putting ourselves at risk. But again, I think that comes back to the question, right? Because many of us that are in roles that are all about people, right? We want to be there to protect our people or our clients or our customer base or whoever. And that's what it all comes back to. And it's not to say, by all means, care for those people, but ensure that you're also putting yourself on that list. That's where we end up with that big gap.
Thank you. Do you wanna, is the microphone being, there we are, just behind you.
Diolch yn fawr, Kelly. Thank you for that. I really found it very interesting. I wanted to ask, how do you, if you see symptoms of burnout in work colleagues or people you lead or manage, how do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, the biggest thing really, I would never go to anybody and say, hi, I think you're at burnout. Okay. And the reason that I would say that, actually what happens is that the higher our stress levels, we actually move into like the primitive part of our brain, right? Our kind of fight, flight, freeze response. And when we're in that primitive brain, we are literally like, we're fighting for our lives, right? So we continue to keep fighting. If I say to anybody that is experiencing signs of burnout, I think you're at burnout, that fight, flight, freeze, but right, I've got to keep going, right? Kelly thinks I'm failing. I've got to now be performing even better. I've got to be trying even harder. I've got to be doing all of this stuff. But we can start to breadcrumb. I call it breadcrumbing, right? So actually, I listened to this podcast the other day. Maybe you want to listen to this. It was quite interesting. Can we talk about this? You know, can we talk about this over lunch together, right? I don't know if I'm experiencing it, right? We listen to this thing. What we want to be able to do is create the awareness in people of what burnout is and allow them to come up with the solutions for them to say, I need to make the change. Because it can be really, really dangerous if we say to people, you are experiencing all of these signs, because their fight, flight, freeze kicks in. They try working even harder. And of course, then the increased stress will start to then cause other issues for them. Does that help? So breadcrumbing all the way if we started to recognise it in other people. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a couple of comments there saying, thank you for the light bulb moment. I did not know why that was why I had burnout. Now I see it was because I wasn't able to bring me to work.
Yeah.
I think, the one above that, do you see compassion fatigue as an indicator of burnout?
Yeah, but we've got compassion fatigue, we've got change fatigue. There's definitely all of those things. I mean, I think compassion fatigue can definitely be an indicator, right? I don't want to listen to your problem anymore. So I get like we spend, again, if I go back to my HR career and experience, it's that next person that drops on the door, right, that wants to tell you that they've got an issue with their dog, and you think like, do you know what I'm dealing with, right? But of course, you need to be nice and you need to smile and you want to be able to help that person. But absolutely, yeah, the fact that you do not have like the mental capacity to take on anything from anybody else can absolutely be an indicator, yes.
I think there was a question in the middle of the room earlier. Oh, no? All good? Yeah. How can we avoid chronic stress or staff burnout in an environment where budgets and resources are continuously being cut and your workload's expanding?
We've got another hour. No, so again, right, we need to start from ourselves. We need to start with those boundaries. None of us can continue to work 16 hours a day continuously, right? We have to be setting those boundaries. We have to be saying this is what it is. We need to talk about some of those changes in budgets and talk about some of the challenges and talk about some of the difficulties. And we might not be able to come up with a solution together. But again, if I as an individual am setting my boundaries, if I am saying I am not prepared to put myself at risk or do any of this, and again, if we're in toxic workplaces, right, we get told we need to do whatever it takes to do the job, right? Don't care that you've got kids' birthdays, right? You're staying to do whatever. I'm not saying all of that is toxic workplaces. Sometimes it absolutely is the nature of the job. But if we're in workplaces where our workplaces do not appreciate the fact that we are people and that we have a life outside of work and it's starting to impact us, we just need to keep speaking up about it, right? The change has to start with us. So as part of that, we need to manage our workload and our time and our energy and our boundaries in the best possible way. Have those open and honest communications with our leaders and our teams, but there is only so much that you can do as one person, and that needs to be starting with you. Does that help?
And how do we deal with senior management who see stress or illness as a weakness? Because, and hope for a big payout as well. There we are, that's what we're looking for.
Again, I think we have got, right, so many senior leaders that are, from what I can see, on the brink of burnout, right, that are struggling with their own stress levels. They just won't admit it. And again, a lot of the time we assume that because we're in these senior roles and we're being paid the big money, right, it's part of the job, right? We're supposed to be stressed, we're supposed to be ill, we're supposed to be, kind of going all the time. And actually that doesn't need to be the case. I think leaders that don't understand stress or that say that stress isn't present, I genuinely think they're trying to hide their own levels of stress and what's going on for them. And if they also started with that self-centered model and started looking after themselves, they would then have more compassion and more empathy and more understanding for their people. Even if they can't fix anything, they would understand what's going on for their people. They would want to understand why you are feeling stressed, why are you feeling the way that you're feeling, and let's do either what we can about it, or unfortunately there's nothing that I can do at this moment, but I'm appreciative of everything that it is that you're doing. So the leaders also have to start with themselves. I think, with workplaces all over the world at the moment, if there is one leader that thinks stress is non-existent, they're on a different planet, really, aren't they?
And I think, it goes into one of the questions here. Oh, hang on, it's gone and disappeared now on me. All right, we'll move on. So people are generally in the public sector to serve. It's, I've heard lots of very inspirational people who work in the public sector saying that, it's a calling. Mm-hmm. For a lot of us, we're here because we want to make a difference. Yeah. How do you equate that with being self-centered, and how do you align that with your core values?
Yeah. So again, and maybe like serving, right? Being of service is probably a value, right, for anybody that's kind of working in that sector. In the 70s, when kind of burnout was first being spoken about, it was those in caring professions. It was doctors, nurses, those in education. And then it kind of really started to ripple through. And actually we recognise that anybody that cares for their people or their team or within their organisation is more prone to burnout. because by nature of their people. But again, I think, I suppose it comes back to that kind of that empty cup, right? We can't fill from an empty cup.
Yeah.
If we're actually there to be of service to others, I need to have some energy left in order to be able to serve. If I'm running on empty, I cannot be there for you. One of the earlier questions about kind of compassion fatigue. Yeah. If I stop caring about you, but I say, well, it's part of my job, but I need to actually, I'm not doing my job, right? I can't be of service if I'm at the point of compassion fatigue that stops me caring about the people that I'm supposed to be caring about. So again, it's that, is that vicious circle, but so it has to start with us. But we need, maybe being of service, helping others, maybe that's a core value of yours, but how can you also then give that to yourself, right? Where is that missing? And if you can answer that question, then you will have, the fullest bucket to be able to kind of go and give whatever it is that you need to others.
I'm going to do a 2-in-1 question.
Okay, go.
Number 1.
Yeah.
How are you now?
I'm okay, I'm living with 3 lifelong health conditions, but I love it, right? I love being able to do this work. I never thought I'd do it even for a few years after. Everyone said, you need to be telling your story. And I was like, nobody cares. And even with my last book, it was like, you need to be telling your story. I was like, no. But yeah, I genuinely love it. This is, you just kind of mentioned in terms of kind of calling, right? This is what I'm here to do. This is absolutely what I'm here to do, and I love it.
Other than leaving your job, what else did you do to recenter yourself, to recover? Because it's not just about resigning and moving on. No. The steps that you took to get yourself.
So I absolutely started with getting clear on what I was. So initially, in that kind of first year period between Burnout 1 and Burnout 2, and we can probably all relate to this one, right? I did a list of things that I was told would make me healthy. Right? I did the journaling, I did the meditation, I did the yoga, I changed my diet, I stopped drinking, I got the sleep, 25 litres of water a day, right? I was ticking all of these things off the list, right? Because I was told that every single one of these things makes us healthy. And in doing that kind of list of 30 things every day, I was stressing myself out even more. But again, and again for me, I did a lot of self-study, a lot of stuff. So not only do I kind of work on this, but I qualified in hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, yoga, meditation, all sorts of different things. So I want to understand neuroscience. I want to understand the impact that stress is having on our brains and our emotions and on our bodies. So I really kind of threw myself into studying, not actually realizing that all of those things would teach me more about myself. And so, yes, those things were great. You need to stop. If anybody is, if you think anybody is at burnout, it will stop you, right? And everybody will say, I haven't got the time. If you do not make the time to stop, burnout will stop you. That's fundamentally what will happen to it. And so I talked about the scale earlier, right? The kind of 0 to 5. We all know that we should be getting enough sleep and drinking lots of water and getting exercise and eating properly, right? All of those things help us in that 0 to 5 category to just stay like happy, healthy humans. But if we want to get really into the stuff, we've got to start with who are we, right? What are my values? What are my behaviours? Who are you? Your passions, your drivers. Answer that, because again, once you understand that, all of the things that you need to do for your health and well-being will just follow, right? Because you have to do them because you're now living in line with your values, so they just become part of your everyday.
There's a comment, somebody loves your mum.
Thanks. I do too, not at that point, but I do too.
Someone's asking, could you share any resources, websites, or training that we could signpost staff to? Obviously, your website.
kellyswingler.com, SWINGLER. Again, there's loads and loads out there. On my website, I've got, it's the complete burnout assessment. That helps, and the reason it's a complete burnout assessment is that helps you, your teams and your organisations to identify burnout risks. So you can have a look at that. Again, I've got podcasts, blogs, books, resources, training, you name it, it's on there. But again, even just understanding things like the 12 stages of burnout, if you just Googled the 12 stages of burnout, there's lots of different graphics that are available that you could get to have a look at those if you're kind of visual people. But yeah, there is it's just called the BAT, the Burnout Assessment Tool, that was created in 2020. There's a book. There's mine, and my latest one is coming out on the 29th of November. But there is one I can't remember the author, so I'll apologise for that, but there is a book that's called The Joy of Burnout. and you were like, what, with everything that you've been talking about? But that's actually a really good book if anybody wants to take a look at that.
Now, question for me. What do you think about well-being initiatives in the workplace?
Shall I leave now? It's again, that's actually part of my upcoming book. For me, well-being is how we do everything. Right? If we want well-being to be an outcome in our organisations, well-being is how we do everything. Well-being initiatives, if they are for the right reason, with the right budget and the right support, giving people what they need, I think can be amazing, absolutely amazing. But I think if they are there because we've got a bit of budget or we want to tick a box to say that we're doing something for our people, I don't want to see them. I've been a judge on a number of kind of different employee engagement kind of awards and wellbeing awards and lots of different things. And some of the things, and again, this is like literally, there's no shame on anybody for this. Some of the organisations genuinely think what they're doing is amazing for their people. And I'm just looking like, that's a basic, right? That should just be a given. And some people are entering awards because it's like mind-blowingly amazing. So, you know, for me, well-being is absolutely how we do everything. If the initiatives are there for the right reason, then go for them.
Right. We are running out of time, but I'm wondering whether you could send off some comforting words. Something to, you know, for us to go back and have a real think about. What's the one thing, you know, you'd like us to bring back to our workplace?
Just like literally, right, get really, really clear on who you are. Genuinely get clear on who you are. That will help you with your relationship, your connection to your teams, your workplace, even like personal relationships, right? Getting clear on who you are will positively impact every single part of your life. It will really, really positively impact you. It's just an absolute game changer. And again, I think, you know, and I said earlier, you do come through burnout, right? I'm here, I'm living proof of it, even with the, you know, even with what I'm living with, I'm living proof that you can and do come through it, right? It can take a very, very long time, which is why prevention is definitely better than cure, but every single one of you can avoid it if you get really clear on who you are. So that would be my go-to. Start asking, who are you, and mean it, and really kind of drill down on that. That's a game changer.
There we are. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.